is 9/11 Freefall.
Gentlemen, welcome to another episode of 9/11 Freefall. I'm your host, Andy Steele. Tonight, my guest is none other than Richard Gage, AIA, founder and CEO of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. We start off in the interview talking a little bit about the European tour, but the bulk of the interview focuses around the recent AIA resolution vote, voting on whether the organization should call for a new investigation into the destruction of Building 7. Richard's going to be going over some of the points that were raised by opponents of the resolution during the business meeting / debate and rebutting some of them. So this is another long interview. We'll be jumping right into it tonight. Before we do, we're going to do what we do every week. We're going to take our 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11 and their families and all the people who died in the wars that followed 9/11. We'll do that starting now. And that's 10 seconds. Richard Gage, AIA, has been an architect of 28 years. He has designed many types of buildings, including fireproof steel frame structures. He's a member of the American Institute of Architects and is currently CEO of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, a 501c3 educational charity that he founded in 2006, representing more than 2,300 architects and engineers calling for a new investigation into the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center high-rises that fell on 9/11, in case all of you didn't know what it was. But he's here today to talk about the AIA resolution vote, among other things. Richard, welcome back to 9/11 Freefall.
Thank you, Andy. It's an honor to be here with you.
Well, I know we're going to have a lot of listeners tonight. So first off, we're going to get to AIA. We got a lot to talk about there. But you were in Europe for, 38 days, was it? And you saw a lot of things. You spoke at a lot of places. So tell our audience about the European tour from Richard Gage's eyes. What were some of the highlights for you?
Pretty exciting tour for us at AE 9/11 Truth, Andy. We had 21 presentations in 11 different countries during this more than a month away on the road. We started in Reykjavik, where we had 40 people. And I don't have the stats in front of me, but at almost all of these events, we had most everybody agreeing with the evidence for controlled demolition by the end of the presentation. Now, we always attract a lot of people who already have done their homework, have looked into the evidence for controlled demolition and agreed with it. But of those who didn't and those who are unsure, we end up convincing almost all of them. And we had 950 people in Delft Technical University, and I think about half of our presentations were, in fact, at universities. But this one was an official. Well, it was supposed to be a debate. We couldn't find anybody to debate us, but the university itself sponsored the event. And they encouraged their students to come, and they came in droves. And the audience was about a third agreeing with the official story beforehand, a third or so unsure, and a third or so agreeing with the evidence for controlled demolition. The presentation is actually on YouTube. So if people want to Google Delft Technical University Gage 9/11, something like that. It should come right up on YouTube, a search on YouTube, actually. So I encourage people to look at that. It was one of the best venues we've been in, one of the most well-attended presentations, and we convinced most people. So I'm pleased with that, and it was quite controversial. The board was in an uproar. Somebody who was on the board, actually, of the university from All Seas Incorporated, an offshore sea shipping company, multi-millionaire CEO, I don't know his name, but he said, this event has to happen. So we like people like that who are in places of influential sway. And we also had a gentleman who was on the board itself of the debating, the guest presentations, who's actually a petition signer of ours. So things came together very nicely for us there in Delft. So from in between those two, of course, was Copenhagen, where we had Niels Harrit and his amazing crew of 9/11 Truth supporters in Copenhagen who put this event on. We had 180 people or so there, and we were able to convince most all of them as well. That happened in Berlin, and about the same number of people. We then went on to London, where we had a series of different kinds of presentations. In one case, I was in a play that Peter Neavy wrote, which addressed critics of 9/11 Truth supporters, and this included James Fisk and David Aronovich and others who have written some really nasty things about 9/11 Truth supporters, whom, of course, they call conspiracy theorists. And the Peter Neavy in the play addresses the comments that they've made in writing, and by the end of the play, the audiences, those who came, are completely convinced, usually. I was in 2 nights in a row, and I didn't see anybody who still agreed with the official story, as Peter successfully wove through these critical remarks and providing evidence to counter them, including myself, who I gave a 10-minute presentation in the course of this play, which was just fascinating, the whole play. Very, very inspiring. We also had a series of presentations in Bloomsbury, Newbury, Canterbury, and the university students were brought by their teacher, this international studies group. They had some real critical people there, and I was challenged with some questions, and I really appreciated that. We invited one gentleman out, and he came to have a beer with us, which seemed to be a common occurrence after all of these presentations. So I think overall, I would say average, the presentations were half to 2/3 full. Of course, we were packed in Delft and in Budapest, our first foray into Eastern Europe. Thank goodness, by the graces of Citlali Castaneda and her wonderful partner, who was an architect in Budapest, and an Italian architect in Budapest, and they're very, very devoted. They made this happen. They just said, you've got to be here. This is your entry into Eastern Europe, and certainly it was. In Italy, we had the rare opportunity to be on the platform with Ferdinand Impasamato, who was the honorary Supreme Court president of Italy. He gave a rousing introduction of us, as well as an indictment of officials who failed to prosecute with any degree of integrity the the alleged hijackers. So he exposed the false paradigm story, the myth of these hijackers, which was an interesting combination. Usually we stay quite technical, but he got to do what he wants because he is who he is, as is Giulietto Chiesa, the filmmaker, and of Zero, a movie that came out early on in the 9/11 Truth Movement, highly influential. He had lots to share, and I was just honored to be in the presence of these two gentlemen. Of course, they spoke in Italian, and somebody whispered English in my ear, so I got, I think, most of what they were saying, but certainly not all. That audience was packed as well. We had 100 people there. So I'm overall very, very pleased with our audiences, with the dedicated European action groups, 9/11 Truth action groups, which worked so hard to bring us there and to put these events on and to get people into the seats. And I'm not pleased with the media. We did not have much mainstream media. We had a couple of FM stations. We had Russia Today they call it Deutsch, in Germany, in Berlin. We had a great interview there, but we did not achieve, any of the mainstream European. We seem to be shunned. We have the news of the crime of the century, that any of them could break the story, if you will, even after 13 years, but they don't dare break with those who seem to run their what do you call it? Help me, Andy. There's a perfect word for this.
Well, it's just fearful propaganda, in my view, if you're talking about what the mainstream media does, and in many cases it's self-censorship. Nobody wants to be the first person, well, it's not really the first person even, but the person within their peer group to come out and say, there's something to this. There's no way this 47-story steel frame high-rise could come down in 7 seconds unless you had something inside helping it along, such as, explosives. So, I mean, people are afraid of speaking out, and I wanted to ask you, you were there in Europe, you've presented here in the United States, you've been all over the world. It sounds like you're running into the same situation with supporters, detractors over there in Europe as you are here. What differences do you see between the European public and the American public on this issue?
Well, I can share this with you, that I believe that the Europeans are as equally sleeping on this issue, these issues of 9/11 truth, as Americans. The media is as controlled. In America here, the problem is that, one of the problems is that 90% of the mainstream media is owned by just 6 corporations. And Project Censored is one of the media critic think tanks that has researched this and found that those who control those 6 corporations. And it's very disturbing, actually. It turns out to be the same people that control the banking industry, the insurance industry, the oil industry, the arms industry. So I think those. Why are Americans and Europeans equally not up to the task of facing the truth about 9/11 en masse? It's very difficult to fill these venues in Europe and the U.S. because we came back to Atlanta once again to a university after we completed this tour. There's yet another presentation here in Atlanta at Georgia Tech. So we had only about 45 people come, and we didn't have many students, and they marketed heavily to students. So it is extremely difficult to get people to come. I mean, in one case in Grenoble, France, one of the most beautiful places I had the opportunity to go in the French Alps. This village is set right at the foot there and they handed out 10 1,000 flyers throughout that community. And I forget how many people we have, maybe 100. So what are you going to do? We come back kind of with a similar set of results in terms of butts in the seats as we did on previous European trips over the last 8 years, and the two previous trips, and as similar to our American audiences. We have to strategize and think about how we are going to break through this wall of denial that we're facing. How close to the summit are we with pushing this rock up this hill? Because it is heavy, it is a burden. We are exhausting our resources to try new ways to reach the public and the professionals. For instance, you mentioned Atlanta. I'd be happy to share what we tried to accomplish in Atlanta, which I think was a new effort.
And we're going to get to that. I think we are having an impact in the sense that rather than breaking through, we're kind of seeping through, like water coming through a cement wall in the basement. So much of what we've talked about over the years has been heard of by the general public. And just from what I observe out there, living life, talking to people, a lot of people have heard of this issue, and a lot of people generally agree. Maybe if they're in groups of people, there's a different dynamic. It's strange. In big groups, they'll be more dismissive, but personally, they'll say, yeah, I agree with you on this. And so I think this has to influence people in other ways in terms of what they're willing to go along with in the greater picture, in terms of how they view other news stories. So, we have a secondary impact in our mission as well, on top of getting that new investigation, which I think we're striving towards. And we're going to get someday, despite all of the denial and all of the resistance by countries, governments, and also by professional organizations, which we're going to get to, like you mentioned, Atlanta. So just to set the stage here, we've talked about this on the show, the resolution, getting the AIA to request a new investigation into the destruction of World Trade Center 7. We've covered this so many times. AE 9/11 Truth has made movies documenting the evidence for controlled demolition. It's the subject of this show. We've gone over this evidence time and time again. We've talked about the resolution, the build-up to it. You can go into the archives and listen to it. But essentially that's what it boiled down to. Not having the AIA come out and say it was a controlled demolition, but simply to request a new investigation, acknowledging the controversy, acknowledging that architects believe there's problems with the official story, and so why wouldn't you have a new investigation? Why wouldn't you look into the biggest mass murder in U.S. history, this glaring smoking gun that has not been adequately addressed? Information is incorrect in the NIST report. We've documented that on the show, and information is being withheld. Everything that we do is out in the open. Process of discovery is there for people to research, but no, NIST keeps everything secret. So why wouldn't you have a new investigation? Should be the most reasonable thing that anyone could ask for in a logical thinking society. But we run into illogical thinking. We run into fear and cognitive dissonance, as we all know. So Richard, with all of that said here, set the stage. How did, we'll talk about what you did during the day before we get to the business meeting and debate. What did you guys do at the booth throughout that day? How did people respond to you guys?
Well, we set it as our mission every year to go to the AIA, which has like 12 to 15,000 architects at these conferences, most of which traverse through the expo booths where they see building materials. Well, they've seen us now for 5 years, and this year we did something different. Our mission still is to educate them about, in this case, this year, World Trade Center Building 7 and its destruction, and the fact that it was not investigated by the AIA whatsoever, like they did the Twin Towers. So we have 55 AIA members who signed a resolution, because there's 50 minimum AIA members to create a resolution, sponsor it. And in this case, we're calling for an investigation of World Trade Center 7, not by the AIA, but have them call up for a new investigation. It's a position statement. It couldn't be easier. And so we put up a whole new booth, a very professional booth. People can see this. It's now on YouTube. Just Google AIA Atlanta, AE 9/11 Truth. And there are some clips up there about it. We have a new, very sexy brochure. We were collecting, after inviting architects to look at the destruction of Building 7, free fall, symmetrical, straight down, into its own footprint in 7 seconds. This building, to most all the architects who stopped and looked at it, they acknowledged that's a controlled demolition. When people actually see it, they get it. Now, probably half of those people ended up signing our resolution, which for next year, we hope to have hundreds, not just 55 sponsors, because we're going to come back and do this again. Because we gave hundreds and hundreds of DVDs away of people just passing by who didn't have time to stop. But everybody got a DVD who did stop, of course, too. And we got some petition signers as well onto our petition, which calls not only for an investigation of Building 7, but the Twin Towers as well. So we felt very energized through the weekend by the overwhelming number of positive responses from these technical and building professionals, mostly architects. It was really impressive. We were busy all day. I mean, they're just walking by, and we said, did you know a third tower fell on 9/11? They go, what? And they looked at it. Most all of them were not aware of this. Some of them were. Those that were had completely false conceptions, overwhelmingly, about what brought these towers down, what the official story was. So we had a great opportunity to educate people who were not traumatized by Building 7 as they were, the Twin Towers. So we found it much easier to talk to people with regard to Building 7. So that's why we put the resolution to the AIA. And here's 400 AIA members in a room representing 4,000 other AIA members. And they had keypads in which they voted for these various resolutions. There are about 6 of them. We were, I think, the final one. And we had collectively about 10 or 12 minutes to present our case, and they had about the same amount of time. And it wasn't back and forth like a debate, but there were 6 different people who presented their case, and so I had the opportunity to give people the evidence. We didn't have unfortunately the opportunity for video, so they could actually see it, but I described it as a free fall symmetrical collapse, that this was not properly investigated as it was, as the AIA did do an invitation to its members to respond to the NIST report on the Twin Towers. They did nothing of the kind for World Trade Center 7, even though they claimed that they did. There were a few bald-faced lies, which I think you have prepared for us in this little mini debate. The end result of which was that people seemed to be largely uninformed, the voters, and therefore were put into a position of believing the AIA president and other officials that spoke, indicating, as they were lying, actually, that this would cost the AIA a lot of time and money. And actually, it's not true at all. It's just a position statement calling for new investigation.
Yeah, what gets me is you said that you had 12 minutes, but actually each person had something like 2 minutes to present. You really can't get into any real great detail with 2 minutes. And what did the other side do with their 2 minutes is pretty much squandered it with a bunch of appeals to emotion and just outright like lies, like you said. So we're gonna start. And what I did originally, just as a note to the audience, I had planned to play some audio clips, but unfortunately the audio that I have is really lousy, and so you guys won't hear it. Richard won't really be able to hear it. So I'm just taking points that were made by people who oppose this resolution and bringing them to Richard's attention again here. If you guys want to see that video, I'm going to link it up in the archive of the show at 911freefall.com. It's some real raw video footage, but you guys had a camera crew out there capturing it for some movie that's going to be made. So this will be available in better quality, but for right now, this is what we got. But initially, the opposition started off with Board Secretary John Padilla, and he said that the board does not support the position. He said that a commission by AIA's president in 2014 found every reason to rely on the findings and the credibility of the 9/11 Commission and NIST and other government agencies that investigated this. So what is your initial reaction to that statement?
Yeah, well, they have every reason not to agree with the NIST report. And the NIST report is found to be completely fraudulent. It completely threw out the original FEMA Appendix C, which documents molten metal, hot sulfur corrosion attack, Swiss cheese steel, liquid molten iron invading the grain boundaries of the steel, none of which can be explained by the official story, all of which requires temperatures exceeding what fires can even get to. And these are normal office fires, not even jet fuel. And, of course, jet fuel is just kerosene. It can't get anywhere near these temperatures, like 2,800 degrees, to melt steel, of which there's abundant, overwhelming evidence beyond which was even produced in the FEMA report in 2002, Appendix C, which NIST illegally just ignored and threw out. So there's no reason to accept NIST, especially since they said they lied. They said they looked for explosives, but when pressed about they're looking for evidence of explosives or explosive residues, they said they found no evidence, for explosive residues. When pressed, they admitted that they never looked for it, which is really amazing. They lied about the free fall of this building originally, and when pressed publicly by members of AIA 9/11 Truth, particularly David Chandler, a physics teacher, who documented the free fall of this building, before they said, well, free fall would mean there'd be no structure underneath it. And of course, that's true. Free fall would mean exactly that. But when they admitted, finally, that there was free fall, they did not acknowledge the implications at that time at all. They said it was consistent with their earlier reports, which is a bald-faced lie. So we have fraudulence in this 1,000-page report full of obfuscation of the facts of free fall, of symmetry. And they lied in their computer modeling, basically telling and would not give the results of the computer modeling, the input data, citing that it would jeopardize public safety were they to release this. That was their official excuse. And, of course, how can it jeopardize public safety to give to the technical and building professionals who are responsible, who are tasked with the public safety, the vital information as to how this building came down and what NIST's assumptions were in their computer models? In fact, their computer models betray their theory altogether, because their theory is that fire brought this building down. And, of course, fire has never brought down a skyscraper ever. And so here their computer model shows a massive warping of the exterior perimeter structure, which is exactly what would have happened were there fires that brought this building down. And there are few, small, and scattered, as you indicated earlier. And yet this building, in reality, comes straight down smoothly into its own footprint in 7 seconds. And yet their computer model begins to tip over even after warping grossly and not behaving at all according to the way that the videos actually show this building came down. In fact, the fires were out on the floor where they said the initiation of collapse began by, they say, thermal expansion. But in fact, thermal expansion couldn't have even been happening because those fires were out over an hour before 5:20 collapse of this building. So they also have a series of events they say happened, according to their theory, in this event, none of which could have happened because this building is fireproofed. So these beams, long span beams, couldn't even have expanded. There's not enough fire heat, the heat from the fire, much less duration of the fire, to expand those beams. And they couldn't have expanded even if there was, because there were shear studs that were tying those beams to the slab above. But they say, oh, those shear studs broke. Well, the only reason they broke in their computer models is because they fraudulently applied all the heat within a second and a half to the beams, and they didn't apply it at all to the concrete, forcing the beams to slip past the concrete in their computer models, breaking the shear studs. It's a complete forced approach. And even if that could have happened, these beams couldn't have pushed the girder off of its seat on column 79, because that girder also, by definition, must have had shear studs. And on the other floors, in fact, the shop drawings show that it did, indicating that it would be the same on this floor. So, but even if that could have happened, the floor 13 couldn't have fallen on 12, 12 on 10, etc., 11, and 11 on 10, etc., because there were 3 other girders framed into that massive column 79, and they would have held the floor up. They wouldn't have just given way, as NIST claims. So even if all of that did happen, we wouldn't have had the lateral complete structural failure such that the entire inside of the building, they say, is caved in. That could never have happened, because we would have seen massive warping on the exterior perimeter structure, which we didn't see. And we're talking about 400 structural steel connections failing every second, according to the reality that NIST had to try to reproduce to show how fast this building came down. It's really amazing.
Well, I wouldn't give NIST the credit of saying that they've even produced or reproduced reality. What they did is they created reality out of nothing, and it's not even reality. And not to mention, we had Chris Sarnes on last week. In the immediate aftermath of the AIA resolution, he talked about stiffener plates that would have countered this thermal expansion, the sagging of the beams that would have countered this thermal expansion. I mean, so many problems, as Richard has outlined, Chris Sarnes, so many people have outlined with the official story, and David Chandler had it right. It constitutes dry labbing, coming up with predetermined outcomes to your experiments. That's not real science. So if anything, the AIA should not have any confidence in the credibility of NIST in this report. And as I said before, a new investigation into Building 7 is the most reasonable thing that anybody could ask for. So we go from John Padilla to Frank Pitts. And again, this was interspersed with people supporting the resolution, so I don't want to give the audience the impression that we didn't have people out there supporting it. But Frank Pitts was the next one who spoke out against it. And he used this term, wolf in sheep's clothing, and I take a slight offense to it, even though I understand what he's saying. If you look at it from just a purely Spock-like logical perspective, not tie any emotion to it, he means that it opens up the door to a bigger issue. But I do take exception to this wolf in sheep's clothing reference, because to look at us as the wolf, like I said, because this is the most reasonable thing anybody could ask for, I don't know, I maybe have a personal issue with that. But can you talk about that reference to this being a wolf in sheep's clothing?
Well, I think I agree with your characterization that that there is a bigger issue here, and we do want an investigation not only of Building 7 but of the Twin Towers ultimately, right? Because there are so many questions with the Twin Towers as well, which we're not getting into on this particular show. But so I have some sympathy with their concern that there are bigger issues here. But the question is, who is the wolf? We are representing the 9/11 family members who started the 9/11 Truth Movement 13 years ago, when their questions were not answered, when they single-handedly forced the Bush administration to have the 9/11 Commission, which never even looked at the destruction of Building 7 at all, even though they were tasked with explaining all the events of 9/11, the major events, of which this was certainly one of them. We are not the wolves. We are the sheep. And the sheep are saying there is a threat. And the threat is not from AE 9/11 Truth, the 9/11 family members, and it is not from the good people of the United States who bought the official myth, hook, line, and sinker. There's a question about who the wolves are, and we don't venture into that territory, but Frank Pitts, Vice President of the American Institute of Architects, is certainly setting himself up as in several lies that have been made, calling us conspiracy theorists, when in fact we are talking about scientific facts and calling for an investigation which responds to the realities, the facts of the case, when, as we just highlighted, NIST did not. So NIST is in the position of being the wolf here, at least those who were placed in strategic positions on NIST, at NIST, including at its head by the Bush administration, of which recently Kevin Ryan has created an exceptional article highlighting the problems with this particular person. I forget his name offhand. So I encourage people to look at Kevin Ryan's latest, I think it's a peer-reviewed paper, actually. Yeah, we certainly have a problem of being called wolves when in fact we're screaming, fire when there's fire, and they're saying there's no fire. Everybody go back to sleep. When in fact the fire has been burning since 2001. We've invaded 2 countries in which over 1 million people have perished. We have lost our valuable, cherished civil liberties with the First and Fourth Amendments of the United States undone. The controlled demolition of our Constitution by the Patriot Act, the Military Commissions Act, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, where any of us can be held indefinitely without a right to a trial lawyer. And this is unconscionable in America. We have a $4.5 trillion global war on terror. If there's any question about what happened on 9/11, and these buildings are key to the whole thing because it is so obvious and so scientific. And that's what we're pointing out, is scientific facts. And yes, they do open the door to Pandora's box. We acknowledge that. But we are standing on scientific, factual ground here. with this call for a new investigation of Building 7, and it is solid. And it requires, I guess, these board members of the AIA to actually lie in order to make their points and sway individuals. But that's not going to happen forever. We're going to be coming back next year, and we're coming back in force. And, eventually, I think you're right, it's like water seeping in through the basement wall or the filling of a swimming pool. It just takes a lot longer than I think we thought it would take when we started AE 9/11 Truth 8 years ago.
Now, the next guy that went up was Donald King, and he started off referring to the 797, I think, pages of the NIST report, as if the number of pages is relevant. If it's wrong information, it's 797 pages of lies. But putting that aside, what do you have to say about his assertion that it was structural damage from World Trade Center 1 and extreme fires that brought down World Trade Center 7?
Well, NIST themselves says that the structural damage from the beams and so forth that came down from the nearby Twin Tower, North Tower, was not a significant factor in the cause of this building's destruction. So we can simply hang our hat on that and agree. Because if it were, then the building would fall toward its damaged side. It would fall over if it collapsed at all. But this says this is not a significant factor. The fires that they claim, I think several people claim, were raging fires. We didn't have the opportunity to show people that they were small, few, and scattered. We have video and photographs of the worst fires that there were. And they're spread out. They're not raging. Now, buildings have had raging fires. World Trade Center 5 was one of them, completely engulfed. It did not fail. If any of those World Trade Center skyscrapers were to fall due to fire, it would have been that one, completely raging. The building stood. They had to dismantle it piece by piece. The Beijing hotel in 2009, which hotel? The China TV hotel, CCTV. Mandarin Hotel, which was a CCTV building, was completely engulfed. 44 stories, didn't fall. And so many examples of very hot, large, and long-lasting fires in these buildings that never failed. Well, yeah, this building dropped like a house of cards in just 7 seconds due to these small fires, specifically on the north side, which were out over an hour before on the floor that NIST said started the initiation of collapse.
Well, and I just want to point out also, because he referred to the 700-plus pages of information, but he didn't have to read the 700-plus pages of information to debunk his own statement. He just needs to go to NIST FAQ. I believe it's point number 21. I want that to sink into the audience's head, where NIST says that it did not cause a collapse initiation. In fact, the damage to Building 7 was on the opposite side of where the collapse allegedly started, according to the official story. So that's right out the window.
Exactly. It would have completely debunked their own theory if they said that it did have a significant effect.
Now, what do you have to say to Donald King's assertion that if what we're saying in this vast conspiracy, and kind of talking down manner that he laid it out, but if there's this vast conspiracy, it should be taken to law enforcement and not the AIA, essentially washing the AIA's hands of any issues with the official 9/11 story when it comes to Building 7?
I like your reference there. They have the intention of washing their hands of this building because it is a hot potato that they do not want to handle. They can't afford to handle it because they bungled it from the very beginning, as they did the Twin Towers, by the way, which we'll get into in another show. But they have to make this go away. So they are washing their hands with it. So they say, yeah, this is, if this is true, this is a criminal prosecution. They're darn right about that. It needs to be a criminal prosecution, and there's a lot of political issues because our politicians are not handling it at all either, nor is the media, as we discussed earlier. So we're trying to get the AIA to handle it because it is a building, after all. if this building came down due to normal office fires, the official reason for this building's collapse, then there are hundreds of skyscrapers with similar design that are equally imperiled. And there was no systematic effort to review the existing buildings that have been already built, nor any structural changes to the building code, the International Building Code, that governs the design of these buildings. NIST made some recommendations, but none of them structural recommendations were incorporated into the building code, and that is a damning indictment of the official story, which says this building came down due to fires. So right there and then, I mean, the architects and building code officials know that these buildings are already safe. And that's why they didn't do anything to incorporate these changes.
Right, and that's why the AIA needs to be involved, because if the official story is true, then our buildings are not safe. Our steel frame high-rises are not safe. Fires can break out and bring them crashing down. This becomes an AIA issue if they believe the official story. So what's the AIA going to do? Because now, by rejecting this resolution and rejecting this position statement, they've essentially taken another position statement saying random fires can bring down steel frame high-rises. So what are they going to do about that now? What are they going to do about that issue? Are they going to wash their hands of that too? Are they going to have their cake and eat it too? Apparently they're trying to, because they have to do one thing or another.
They're certainly trying to. Yeah. You would imagine and hope that they would have to do one thing or another, but they're not. They're sitting in the middle. Well, they're on this fence, and they're walking this tightrope, really, is what it is. And we're kind of shaking the tightrope. We're saying, hey, you can't have it both ways. You can't say that our high-rises are safe while you're saying they can come down due to normal office fires, because that's the tightrope we're walking. And we're going to shake it up with 200 or 300 sponsors next year for this resolution. And instead of 160 votes out of 2,000 or 3,000, we're gonna have a lot more. We may not win next year. It may take us a few years, but you're going to see those votes climb rapidly as people become aware of this issue, because it's not just people on the street who are becoming aware of this issue more and more every year, because it's a lot easier to talk to people on the street. That's how I gauge the consciousness of people, by how many negative comments versus how many positive comments, open-mindedness relative to questioning the official story about 9/11 that I get. And I'm not alone. It's universal across the 9/11 truth movement. It's a lot easier in the last couple of years than it was in 3-4 years ago. And it's true at the AIA conference as well. We got 115 sponsors for next year. And we haven't even begun to tap the email list of architects that we have access to. Many AIA members, among the 80,000. So our work has just begun, and it's a long haul, Andy. We're after it, though.
Well, and that's why our supporters shouldn't be too bummed out about this. I mean, look at the obstacles that Galileo had to encounter before they got to the truth about how our solar system works, and all of his supporters. Look at the obstacles that the abolitionists had to encounter for decades before they came to the society came to the realization that you can't have a country be called free and have a portion of it be in chains. So, I mean, we're making progress all of the time. It just takes time to break people out of their trances. It takes time to change the way people perceive their universe. It's inertia is one of the biggest problems. I think it was Edward Bernays said this. Inertia is one of the biggest problems towards getting society to change. I'm paraphrasing it, but that was the message right there. So we're doing something about it, and we're going to be back next year. We're not going away. They don't like that we won't let this go, and we're not going to, because this is the truth, and this is the most important issue facing us, even if a decade after the event took place.
Well, just forcing them to lie to justify their position publicly in front of the leaders of the AIA. Think of how many people stopped by our booth, got educated about Building 7, saw those fires, how small they were, saw the building, how it came down by free fall, and talked to us, learned the facts. They got to see their AIA leadership, board members, lie. They lied about the fact that this was going to take AIA money and time of its members, when in fact it's just a position statement. They got to see the lack of integrity here. I think it's extraordinary.
Right, and I want to make sure I get to this point, too, because this is really telling about where we are in society with regard to this issue. But there was a guy, he was an architect, and I don't know his name because the audio wasn't very good. I think he was obviously from New York City. Maybe you know his name. But he got up there, and he said that he had an office in one of the towers, and he lived through that day, and he just can we just move on? And then people clap, but... and I'm sorry that he lived through that day. It's terrible for everyone that was there. I've interviewed people who also lived through that day that also agree with us, so I guess now we can all be equal. But that's an emotional statement. That's not a technical statement. That's not a refutation of the evidence. That's just pulling at people's heartstrings. And again, with all due sympathy to this person, if he lost anybody or was traumatized by living through those events, that doesn't refute anything. That's not an argument. I mean, what do you think about these emotional statements in the face of technical discussions and people's reactions to them?
Yeah, and this is a very emotional issue. Not what we put before the AIA. That was a technical issue. But it ties into emotional issue, and they keep trying to, by calling us conspiracy theorists, they're shutting down the conversation. By saying we're wolves in sheep's clothing, they're trying to shut down the conversation. And by saying, let's move on, I was there, I lived through they're shutting down the conversation, and nobody wants this conversation, really. We don't even want it. We want the truth. We don't want to go back into the pain of 9/11 any more than they do, but we have to look at the ramifications of 9/11, as I highlighted earlier. As society changed, everything we do at the airports, the draconian measures that have been instituted threatening our Constitution and our economy, all of this is equally, way more of an emotional reality and a physical reality, of course, that challenges the effort to shut this conversation down based on emotional arguments or pulling on people's emotions like they tried to do here. And I just hope the leadership was successful in exposing themselves. That is, the AIA board was successful in exposing themselves to the middle-level managers, if you will, of the AIA present at the meeting, the 400 of them, that they could see through most of this. Now, their votes indicated that they didn't largely, but a lot of seeds were planted. And my God, I guess that's what we need to hope that we were successful in doing, and that next year we'll see the fruition, the harvest of those seeds.
Now, the next person to go up was Michael Malinowski. He didn't really say anything of all that much substance worth even noting. He just said AIA needs discipline to say no to launching this new program and said it would divert resources from challenges like diversity and all these blanket issues that are kind of just... I don't sound kind of obscure to me. So we're just going to skip here because I want to get we're almost towards the end of the show. Dan Barnum closed it off. He's on the board of AE 9/11 Truth. He's been on this show before, and he said something at the very end that I think is really poignant. I just want to get your thoughts on it. He said that AIA is a professional, not a political organization, but if AIA votes no on the resolution, they're making a political decision, not a professional one. So I just want your comments on that in the last minute or two here of the show.
I thought that was particularly poignant myself. Because they're claiming just the opposite, that this is a criminal issue and we should be going after justice that route and not at the AIA, which is of course ridiculous. These are buildings, and Dan is exactly right. This is a professional issue. If we can say or agree that a small set of fires can bring a 47-story massive skyscraper to its knees, in fact, completely shatter the structure from top to bottom in 7 seconds, and that symmetrically in the exact manner of a classic controlled demolition, which, of course, fires have never brought down any skyscraper. If they can live with that set of facts and call it not a professional issue, we have a major problem. So once again, I'm hoping that the 400 members there are beginning, I'm hoping to God that they're beginning to see through the lies that they were told. And Dan made it very poignantly, and it was the last point made before this vote. But people are slow to turn. We're using the back of our brains, the old limbic reptilian system in our brain, because we don't want, they didn't want to acknowledge any of the implications that are there. Once they agree that this is a controlled demolition, this implies some sort of an inside operation. That, of course, gets political real fast, but it starts with technical. It starts as a professional issue, and Dan was exactly right, and I hope he planted that seed for next year.
Well, we are making strides, and I hope they keep on talking because we just keep on presenting the truth, and the truth speaks for itself, and I believe that the truth will set this country free. We just got to keep on bringing it to as many people as possible. But Richard Gage, thank you so much for coming on 9/11 Freefall.
You're very, very welcome, Andy. Thanks for having me. It is a pleasure to be here with you.
This program's on every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. You can also download MP3s of this show from the Internet Archive by going to 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week and good luck.